Lord, we bless your holy name. I thank you for this day, this morning, these people who have gathered here. I pray that we would be together, drawn to you, that you would bring us closer to you. We'd hear your voice. I pray your blessing upon this day and upon those who teach, those who will be led by you. I pray for this time now, that our hearts would be or take the place of our souls, and that we would put what is important in our priority. Pray your blessing upon this time. Pray this in your name.
Amen. I had a brief conversation with Wes this morning on the phone, and because I probably don't have time to share with everybody, I encourage you guys to make the time with the finances that we spend with Wes a little more interactive, and maybe even on the behalf of some of the younger folks, be a little more forward about asking questions for clarification, and do that for yourself, because I know that for a number of you, probably for most of you, that there's a lot of terminology and stuff that's not, you don't understand it, or at least not in the financial realm. So don't hesitate to ask that. I think Wes felt pretty bad last week when he had shared whatever he did, and then a couple people were like, yeah, we don't understand. Can you simplify the explanation? And he was thinking, oh my goodness, I spoke over their heads, and he didn't want to do that. So, but he really wants you guys to come away with some really helpful things. So don't hesitate to ask questions and get clarity on that. So I'm not really giving him any limitation of time and number of weeks as long as he wants to do it. So he might slow things down, but I think he would really, I really want you guys to get to know Wes a little bit more. And so, I don't even hesitate to ask him questions, and I'm not saying you have to force something, but that might encourage him to share something about his life or, whatever else, because I think he would really enjoy that. And I think it'd be really beneficial for you guys. I'm more interested in him getting to know you than certain financial things. And so you need to always approach that. If you think about the way that you interact with somebody that is giving you teaching and instruction, they can even become better. A better teacher, a better professor, a better mentor with your engagement with them. If a student is not interactive and basically doesn't really, and I'm not thinking that you guys are not interested in that. I think you're very interested in it, but for whatever reason you're pretty withheld and quiet. But the more interactive that you are, the more those things have the potential to apply to your life. And I would think, because of just having gone through formal education, in the U.S. all the way through college, and also having taught students and stuff, there are things that come as a result of class engagement that would maybe not even otherwise have been shared because of engagement, And so things can be on a syllabus or on a bullet point presentation, and those are always for a good teacher. Those are always just kind of guidelines for sharing and discussion. But if things open up more, then they can really become alive. And you should treat all teaching and instruction in that way. That's why we've really, even in going through materials like this, we're looking at not just, okay, what can I learn from how to do this or how to do that, as an advisor or someone who wants to learn wisdom or whatever else. But notice the relationship between the master and his disciples, and why he was able to share what he did in such a meaningful way to them. And that relationship and what's imparted through that relationship is more important than the information that is shared in it. That's, if you really want to learn to be a student of life and a student in life and throughout life, then your attitudinal perspective of how you build relationships with certain people has to change. So you may learn something, whatever it is, a skill, an art, an academic skill, or whatever else, a knowledge base. But if you guys even think back, I don't know, I had more formal education than most of you. You guys never participated in any kind of formal school, did you?
I did. They didn't really.
What age was that for you?
I was like till first or second grade.
So really young,
Yeah.
Did you, Kayla?
Mm-hmm.
What age?
I was probably second grade as well.
Yeah. So really young. I mean, I went through, I mean, it was a private school, but all the way through high school, and then I went both to community college and Bible college. And I can honestly tell you that I don't remember anything that was taught. But I remember certain people that taught me. And I definitely remember I can definitely remember some of the greatest lessons that I learned were not even part of the teaching course. It was just getting to know someone a little bit, or having I had a pretty good connection with my band teacher, who was also my homeroom class and history teacher for several years in high school. And but because I was really interested in playing the trumpet, and he was a brass major, so he could play any brass instrument, which was incredible. I just learned a little bit more about him. So I heard about some of his the way things that he went through in school and how he learned things and the experiences that he had. So I won't even forget his name. It's Mr. Witcher. Do you remember your teacher's name in second grade? So you guys were pretty young, but I had a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher and a third grade teacher. I only remember my first grade teacher, Miss Costas. And because she was a very, very strong disciplinarian, actually, and so the way that she did things was pretty intense. But she was also a really nice lady. And so I remember her. And I remember, Mr. Morrow was my science teacher, and Mr. Fowler, one of my history and also Bible teachers in high school. But it was because of the different relationship. I can remember a couple of my coaches. And so, but I don't remember anything they taught. I don't remember any of the history lessons. I have this general knowledge of history, and I think that's part of that learning process. But I couldn't go back to a day of instruction and say, here's what it was. But what you can go back to is the experiences that you have with people, the conversations personally that you have with people, the things that you learn about someone's life. And then the things that you recognize that were in some insight into how that person thinks. And that's actually what you remember. You remember how they treated others, you remember how they treated you, and you remember the way that they, their perspective in life. And so those are the things that really, imprint on your mind and stay with you. And so that can be very much the case even in personal relationships. You may not remember a whole ton of individual detailed conversation but you remember experiences that you go through. And then those experiences actually are the things that bring to memory from the deeper places in your mind, in your inner man, the conversations, even in detail. And that's the way those things imprint. And so some of that is, the more scientific side of how the human mind and emotion experience works, the things that stay with us and don't. But it at least has some implication toward the way that you posture yourself in relationship to people and what you really want to receive from them. And so, to be a student of life is to be of such a posture of mind that it's not like you're thinking in some awkward way, I wonder what this is going to teach me all the time. Kind of like the guy in Star Wars who's, I am one with the Force and the Force is one with me. Like you're forcing this into yourself. But you can learn to have that perspective of taking the experience and information that you are receiving into something that's learning. And then it can be greatly enhanced through the relationship that you have with someone. And so that's why it's really important that we understand the nature of the relationships and the appointment of relationships in our life. That should be something, very, very different. Not just, can I get something from you, a piece of knowledge, a piece of information. But I want to know your life because I can learn from it. And that's not the same as teach something to me. Because when you have that posture of life, then you're an open vessel into which things, you're an open receiver. And that's a much better way of becoming a student, living life as someone who always learns in everything that they do. And that was one of the very simple attitudinal joys that Brother Emmanuel had, was that good or bad experience, negative or positive, wasn't really the issue, as if he was pursuing one thing or another. But it's hard to explain, but it was one of the things that was very, very simplistic about him, almost childlike, was because he was always in that position to be curious and to learn, but also in a very sincerely personal way, and then with the added not boundary, but like enhancement of the joy of learning about someone else's life. And then I have some things like that where if someone has really keen interests and like in their life, I've used the example before, my friend Norman, who was really loving golf and whatever else, and I really sincerely liked playing and doing that with him, going to the driving range and having him, because he had a couple of generations of, his dad was an avid golfer and they really enjoyed that. It was like one of their life's passions, not just a hobby. They didn't do it professionally, but they really loved that. And so, that made me really interested in it because I was his friend. And I wasn't doing anything just because he wanted to do it. It was just, that became an interest for me because he was so interested in it. And I remember one time we were at the driving range, and he had the membership to Austin Country Club, so it was a really nice place, whatever. And he invited me to the driving range, and we were talking about how to swing, and he was telling me what I shouldn't do and all this kind of stuff. And it was really helping me understand how golf works, which was intriguing to me. It was pleasurable, it was a fun thing to do. It was learning a new skill, and understanding the way things work a little bit was enjoyable to me. So that for me was all like self-centered, it wasn't selfish per se, but it was like I was enhancing myself. I wasn't doing that for him. I was enjoying it with him. And that morning, he stopped and he said, you know, Tim, I just really appreciate that about you. He said, I know you don't care a single thing about golf, but you come here and you play with me and you really enjoy it. And he said, that just makes me, you know, really feel this endearment to you as a friend, because I know you didn't really care about this, but you've invested yourself in this time to come here and do this with me, and something that I really enjoy, and that really means a lot to me. And so, like, if we did that in the sense that I was looking at him not as, you know, just a peer, just a buddy friend, but no, this is somebody, and I'm not talking about formal thought process. I'm just talking about the way that I engage with him. This guy is very passionate about it. He's got a lot of experience with it. He can really show me I can learn something from this guy. And so it wasn't about him being better than me, although he was exponentially better than me. You know what I mean? He can show some skills to me and show me why you do this and that. And then I understand so much more about the game. But see, I'm clearly drawing from his desire, from his own passion in life and skill there, in a way that's not like somebody's paying him to teach their child a golf lesson. Well, that's going to be very formal, right? Stand this way, do this, you know, oh, no, that's wrong. And that young person may learn very well, but not in the same way. Not in the, oh man, something in my life has opened up to you and I will freely share with you anything. You know, you have access to the storehouse here. In that kind of relationship. We can build and foster that with others. And I see that exemplified here too. And that's why you have some of the students or disciples of Confucius that were closer than others. Because he saw their passion for learning as something that was an inner drive. And it's not a stacking knowledge base. It's a hunger for truth. Really. And some have it to a greater extent than others. But what I want to tell you is that this is kind of touching into the subject of native substance and things like that. But it's something that it's not something that is just, you know, in your genes. It's something that some people do have as a more natural tendency, but it's something also that can be developed. And that's that's why no one should be discouraged in this whole process, is that if you really want to learn to be a learner, that's possible to do. But you have to be interested in it, you know, and curious about it, and then begin to put some of those things to practice. Maybe a little awkwardly at first, but then they become again, it's kind of like riding a bike. At first you're thinking about, am I doing this? Am I being curious? Am I asking the right questions? You know, right pedal, left pedal, keep your balance, don't turn, you know, but you're thinking all those things. But the more that you do it, the less you think about it. And the more that practice, this discipline of how this operation works, in this case, a bicycle, you don't think about it anymore. You naturally do things. It kind of becomes one with you. And that's the way that certain disciplines in life and the mind work. So you should never look at them as, well, that person is just that way. That might be partly true. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn it. So I heard someone talking about this the other day, and he was talking about some of the great disciplined golfers, and he said, you know, the only difference between me and that guy is time and passion. So it's not an inborn ability, it's discipline. And, you know, people like Michael Jordan, some of the great, you know, some people that defined certain sports, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, those kind of guys, they would tell you, and that's what this one guy said, the only difference between me and Tiger Woods, that's a big difference, right? Is passion and time. Time commitment to put forth the discipline and the desire to do it. And so that's a wonderful perspective, not because you're comparing yourself to others, but because you have learned that if you put if you apply yourself to a certain discipline, then you will attain. And this isn't about I'm not speaking about self-attainment and those kinds of things. I'm speaking about self-discipline and applying yourself to things. Don't just give certain skills and abilities away to others as if that's just the way they are and this is just the way I am. Because that's a lie to yourself. And that's selling yourself short of something, of your own potential. And we don't need to think of ourselves in terms of the greatness we can achieve or anything, but your potential, because God gave you that potential. It's not limited. God hasn't limited you. And I'm not talking about earthly accomplishments. I'm talking about a perspective of life. You should never say, well, I just don't have that. That's ridiculous. The only thing that you don't have is desire and discipline. That's the only things that you don't have. So if you can sow in and cultivate the desire and then apply yourself to the discipline, there's nothing you will not be able to achieve. And I hope you understand the context of what I'm sharing here. Many people use that to achieve earthly success, and that's not a bad thing. But it would by far sell you short of the way that you could apply yourself to a disciplined life as a son in God's house and essentially become all things in the earth, before men, and before God. But you have to choose to apply yourself that way. And so often we let our personal desires and aspirations in life, the things that we want to do, the things that we would like to achieve or have, those actually become a hindrance to our ability to attain them or to even pursue them, because we get locked up in the short term instead of applying ourselves in the discipline of the long term. Discipline is daily. Discipline is momentary. It's every situation. It's every thought. And that shouldn't be overwhelming to us. It should be something that we release the extremities, those things that hinder our minds and draw our attention away from the devotion and discipline of the day. And you will find that to actually be a very fulfilling, pleasurable experience in life. Because you having learned to learn from all things, there in essence are not good and bad things. There are only certain experiences from which you learn in different ways in life. And you don't get trapped up into your mind with all bad stuff all the time. Especially if like our family has a little bit more of a critical and negative way, a pessimistic way of approaching life. Well, we need to be free from those bonds. And not just to, quote unquote, think positively, but to think from a more circumspect place of willingness and with desire and curiosity to learn and experience in life. So in that light, let's continue to learn a bit. I think we're on 14:9.
Yep.
Okay, Miss Kayla, and then Esther.
Someone asked about Zichan. The master said he was a benevolent man. They asked about, how do you say that? Zichi. The master replied, "Ah, that man.
Zichan, we have already encountered, and the reason for the master's judgment seems fairly clear. Although some take it as a mild criticism, Zichan was kindly, but not as effective as he could have been. There is a great deal of debate over the identity of Zishi, with a similar lack of clarity about the reason for the indeed meaning of the master's comment. Some believe him to be the Prince Shen, style name Zishi, who served as Prime Minister of Chu under King Zhao, and who dissuaded the king from giving Confucius employment. Others argue that he is the Zishi who was a fellow minister of Zishan's in the state of Jin, and who, though by most accounts worthy, was not quite the equal of Zishan. As for Confucius' remark, most take it as either dismissive or neutral. In the latter case, out of a desire not to be overly critical.
Oops, you got a long read.
Yeah. What's that name again?
Guangdong.
They asked about Guangzhou. The master replied, "Now there was a man. He confiscated the 300 household city of Ping from the head of Bao clan, reducing him to abject poverty, and yet to the end of his days not a single resentful word was uttered against him." For Zhong, see the commentary to 322. The head of the Bao clan was a minister in the state of Qi, and apparently his fiefdom was confiscated as punishment for an unspecified crime. The most plausible way to understand Confucius' comment is to follow Kong Hangguo. Yeah. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with this name. His actions were appropriate and reasonable, and therefore even those who suffered from his decisions could find no reason to blame him. Compare this favorable evaluation of Zhong with 1416 through 1417, and contrast it with 322. As for the overall point of the passage, Wan Fuji's interpretation seems most plausible. With regard to Zishan, Confucius divined his heart on the basis of his actions.
Okay, real quick. Do you guys understand what divined means?
No.
Discerned. He understood what his heart was. So that's divination, which means, that's the word, part of the root word there, but anyway, go ahead.
With regard to Zishi, he held his tongue and did not indulge himself in criticism or debate. And with regard to Zhong, he glossed over his crimes and instead highlighted his achievements. All of this illustrates how the sage approves of good qualities and hates faults, seizing upon any positive quality he can find and praising it, while at the same time not giving anyone more than his due, never willing to exaggerate the talents of anyone.
So when we're looking in, oops, I have book 13 here. Alright. We're in book 14. So this is
Clean.
just a reminder that most of the passages in this book concern themselves in some way with respective duties of ruler and minister. Here the key to rulership is presented as employing people correctly, which requires that one be a good judge of character. A potentially difficult task, since often a person's outward presentation does not always match their inner character or behavior, or actual behavior. A large portion of book 14 is dedicated, which we're not, oh yeah, we're right there. 14:8 to 14:19, is dedicated to case examples. So that's basically what we're reading here. That's why it's saying the disciples or the students ask Confucius, they ask the master, what about this guy? Tell us about this guy. So they're going through the various leaders in the past or present and saying, what can we learn from the way that they ruled? So in order for you guys to glean what you need to out of this, you need to understand the perspective from which the conversation's happening. And then you'll be able to gather a little bit more. Our case examples of how one would go about judging the character of others. So that's the divination that he did. He said with this Guangzhang, he did it based on his actions. What actions would those be? The way he held a spoon when he ate a soup? No, it's talking about in the ministerial position that he was put in and how he made certain governmental decisions there. Those were his actions. Judging the character of others, with the master evaluating the behavior of various historical figures, noting both their strengths and weaknesses, and thereby illustrating the perspective powers of a gentleman. On the minister's side, one must be dedicated to the way and not to the pursuit of salary, honest with oneself and others, and courageous in remonstrating with one's ruler when it comes to matters of rightness. A good minister also persists in holding to rightness even when the situation seems hopeless, and this probably accounts for the series of passages at the end of the book, where Confucius rebukes, either verbally or by example, recluses or nonconformists of various types who have given up the Confucian way and withdrawn into private life. So, anyway, it's helpful to remember the perspective that these conversations are coming from to better understand. So we have three different individuals, two. Three. Zishan, Zishi, and Guangzhang. That was entertaining to Elijah.
It's nothing.
It's okay. I really have been meaning to. I need you to send me, and you should send it to each of us, what you think is the best resource for, what is it called?
PN?
PN?
I don't think there is a best resource. You can learn PN anywhere. You just look it up online.
Well, I'm talking about like something to look at. Is there a document or an image that you can send to us so that we can put a little practice?
I'm not
in
laughing at any.
Oh, I don't think you are. I actually want to learn it. It is funny to not pronounce things correctly, and I think we should, because it's possible to do. So why don't you help us do that?
Yeah.
And then everybody can apply themselves a little bit to that.
Sure.
Okay. So any thoughts and comments? I think that the last paragraph probably is the best commentary to help understand, and then you can reverse apply what Confucius is doing to the individual rulers that he was referring, or ministers he was referring to.
I don't know if humility is something that's pointed out here in context to not willing to over exaggerate. Is he talking about somebody seeing a quality in someone else, or is it someone seeing a quality in themselves when he's talking about never willing to exaggerate the talents of anyone?
Well, I used to feel this pretty poignantly with when Noah was, younger, and maybe by 7-8 years younger, and he was doing a lot on the piano. He still does a lot, but I just remember, I'm just using a kind of an everyday simple example from our own experience. And so where I, as a father, might want to have him do certain things and play and learn and play for others, Emmanuel would always really shy away from that and actually detract from the exaggeration of a talent. Does that make sense? So like, in pretty much in the sense of, well, that wouldn't be healthy for him. That wouldn't be healthy for his mind and for his way of thinking. So don't do that. Don't put it up front. So, and I actually think, no, you could share some of the conversations that Emmanuel had with you about that, because I think he spoke to you fairly directly about it on a couple occasions. Not because you had some potential personal aspiration, but because he was giving you some direction of thought. If you don't have anything to share, that's fine, but I thought I remembered a couple of times where he had conversation with you about that.
I think it was always brought up like in an indirect way. It wasn't like anything we sat down and talked about.
Right.
So when it came to a consideration of who I wanted to be or what desires I wanted to pursue, or the things I did that were helping me become something, anything like that, he would always kind of use the example of things that he considered me talented in, so like piano, or he would even use poetry sometimes, saying like, do you really want to become just another pianist or another poet, or like one time he even said another Abraham Lincoln or whatever it was, because those were just different things we talked about. He said those are good and admirable things, but they're the wrong way to go about.
Sorry, there's a giant spider right there.
Where?
It's huge.
Just step on it and be done.
I was like on my chair.
Step on it.
I dreamed about a giant spider last night. Did you?
And you fixed it.
Sorry, we have a spider interruption here.
No, he's not hurting anybody. Leave him be. He's keeping bugs out.
Okay, go ahead, bud.
Well, that's really all of it is just he was using those things as a way to help me reconsider the manner in which I was viewing myself, who I wanted to be, who I was becoming. Another aspect of that was he would very much encourage the principle of learning from the best when you did learn from, or when you did want to learn anything. So in the case of piano playing, he would very often discourage things that he viewed as being a much lesser means of improving in the skill, just because they may have seemed attractive in some ways didn't mean that they were actually quality ways of going about the practice of the instrument. So like sometimes, actually often, he was very a lot more critical than other people towards even my playing, my improvisation. Most of the time he loved it. He was always enjoying it, but like he other times would say, yeah, it was okay. I mean, you can definitely do better, which nobody else really does, and that was nice. So yeah.
So that was, I mean, that's Noah's experience in that, but the perspective here is, you know, more of one like the master has here, or someone who has this view, a discerning view of someone and that's what's explained in this last paragraph, is looking at the positive things, definitely not encouraging anything that would be, not helpful or to be critiqued, but also not being overtly negative about that. So that's what he says. The sage approves of good qualities and hates faults, seizing upon any positive quality he can find and praising it, and while at the same time not giving anyone more than his due, never willing to exaggerate the talents of anyone. What do you think is the benefit of that? So, Noah had a personal relationship where that was applied in a certain way, but like, why would that be? Why do you think that would be important otherwise?
I think because the person will then begin to kind of crave that attention, and if they don't get it, I feel like that'll probably make them either upset or like, why didn't I get it? And if you're told that all the time.
Well, and I think that does apply to the relationship like between Emmanuel and Noah, but in this case, it is, so that is one aspect of it. But these are in reference to people that are not around and they have no relationship with, they're just observing their life. So, Confucius would not over-exaggerate this person's talents where, he didn't have necessarily a personal relationship. He did with some of them. But some of these were people of antiquity, so people who had lived in the past, and all that they could observe was the way that they lived their life or made certain decisions. And even in that context, he would not exaggerate their talents in so much as this, in a sense, like a middle line of their way of life. So, any thoughts around why that's beneficial?
I think for one, it gives him credibility as a teacher, to be an honest evaluator above all else, and to praise and uphold even the smallest good qualities that he can find, but to be accurate and measured with his compliments. It shows what he values and highlights it to others, because truthfully these evaluations were less about the people themselves hearing it, but more of the people that were learning from Confucius, seeing what was valuable to him and what he valued in others.
Yeah, I think this outlook on life especially goes into what you were just sharing earlier, Tim, about learning from others as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way of it kind of reminds me of our discussion on last Wednesday, worship night, where it was just kind of talking about having an open heart and what it means to be not closed off toward other people. That openness or that view is a lot like this, where it's it obviously looks for goodness and it's centered on that, that's what feeds that perspective there. And so that's how you learn from others, right? It starts with this perspective of learning what even is good and what is admirable, and that's how because you can learn from others in bad ways as well, right? But that wouldn't really be learning from others in the best way that we would consider it, right? So that's
I think this really ties into, and maybe you guys can give this some thought and comment on it. This really ties into the doctrine of the mean in a certain way. I'm thinking of something that I'm hoping that will inspire some thought on your part and commentary.
Maybe we need to be reminded of what that is again. I don't remember.
I doubt I'm thinking what you're thinking, but
Well, he's talking about, Benji's asking for a brief explanation or reminder of what the doctrine of the mean is. and it's not something that you're like, oh, it's just this. Like it's a really huge concept, but maybe you can summarize it a little bit.
It's kind of a life spiritual moderation. So it's not to be considered like a necessarily finding a middle ground or compromise towards everything that you encounter in life. It's like the method by which you do find and walk in the way. Because to reiterate, the way is not the balance, if you will, of every force either working with or against one another that you come across in a situation. It's not a compromise so as to find some false and maintain some false sense of peace and stability. It's I think something that is better considered to be a self-applied thing. So not something that is imposed on your circumstances or on other people, but something that you measure your own motivation, your own motivations, your own heart, your own inner being with. So it is, in that sense, finding it's finding the way by tempering those, I guess what you could say are those tendencies in yourself to be fully committed to one thing or fully committed to another. And again, it's not about a lack of commitment either. It's the way that we kind of zero in on this one way or framework of thinking about a thing, and the way that we value things very quickly and very naturally, just because of the way humans think, becomes very rigid, and we stick to a certain way of thinking, say towards a person or towards a circumstance or scenario that we're familiar with, that is regular to us. And I guess you could say applying that doctrine of the mean, which I don't think is quite the right way to put it, because that is it's a sort of mindfulness,
I think
a temperance.
the example of the arrow and the means of perfection is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the doctrine of the mean is in essence, to come to discover or to always be looking for what is the right way. So what is right and good in this sense, and I'm applying this back to his evaluation of others, is not in the extremes, but to find where in their life they are, in essence, coming to that mean, the standard. The mean is a standard. Okay, it's not a compromise, as Noah said. It's a standard, and it doesn't change. And so, yeah, you're coming to, you're narrowing in on that. And so if you look at how this is in the thought process, it's not like he's saying to his students, let me apply this doctrine and you see how it works. He's doing it in the way that he understands people's lives and the way that they do things. So again, he approves what is good, and how does Confucius define good? It's not just a casual word to him. It's related to goodness. And so he is not just looking for the good in others. This is how all these modern day philosophical phrases and ideals come from a practice that actually had a lot more meaning and discipline applied to it in the mind and heart. So what is truly good in their life? Not necessarily a good deed, because any person can do a good deed, but not all are good. See, that's reminiscent of some of the previous discussions that we've read about in the Analects. And so, but what is good, he approves of and highlights. Why? Because that is the mean. It's coming to that standard of what true goodness really is. That's a good quality. Okay? This person may not be fully developed, or they might, but I will highlight in them what was undeniably good. Okay? Same thing with a fault. He hates the fault, not the person necessarily, but he says, well, that in essence will always bring destruction. That will always end badly. Okay? That will always take you away from the mean, from this central truth and goodness and way or wisdom. And so that too is why he would not give more than due or exaggerate the talents of one, because talents are very much they're like little shiny trinkets. Okay? They don't necessarily represent character and goodness. They're more connected to an outward ability. But the essence of the considerations in the discussions that he's having about these ministers that are being, queried by his students, he's making reference to the application of what is good in them. And that's what I was referring to as a potential reference to the doctrine of the mean, because it's not just a bullet point application of something in someone's life. It's a way of thinking about what is truly meeting a certain standard. And so he's highlighting in others and also not highlighting certain aspects of people's lives. So that's where, with Zashi would say, the master replied, that man, he's not going to be overtly critical. He doesn't have anything directly to say, because he's, he wants to stay on the things that are good. And we've described, there are some other descriptors related to that, not necessarily as synonyms to the word, but virtue, goodness, all in an effort to better understand what a true gentleman is. So, in this context, then, a gentleman is someone who has this very well-rounded engagement and posture in life. They're not reclusive. They're not putting on a facade for others. You see what I'm saying? Like there's this. I don't like calling it a middle ground, because middle ground implies compromise. It's in reference to hitting a mark, and
it's like developing a sense of direction. So the picture I have is like a navigator on a ship, and until you know how he navigates, you always consider a kind of mystery how such a person always enables the vessel that he and I guess everyone else is on to get to the right place. So sometimes, just looking at him from the viewpoint of a crew member, you see sometimes he will battle against the direction of the wind and require the use of oars or whatever it is, seeming to work against the environment. Other times he'll seem to be using the wind, opening the sails and moving the same direction as the waves, going with the environment. It seems to vary, and nobody really knows why. But again, he always ends up getting the right place. But then, if you were to finally ask him, then he tells you that he's looking, and of course I know you can't see it in daytime, but just stick with me in the example. He's using the pole star. He's using the northern star. He's always focused on that one light, that one unchanging reference for direction. And so sometimes it does require him to open the sails. Sometimes it requires him to work against the natural conditions. But that all depends on where he is or how he's postured in respect to the northern star. The northern star doesn't change its position. Everything in the earth changes and varies relative to it, but the one thing that doesn't change is what he has his eyes set upon. And that's what makes it what makes it unchanging, what makes it eternal, is the fact that it's not a mirror doctrine. I always remember Emmanuel really disliked that translation of the work or of the phrase doctrine of the mean. Because doctrine obviously implies it's something that is written or could be read verse by verse, whatever it is. It's not a construct of man's mind. It's not an intellectual tool that can be, or method that can be applied to any situation you encounter. It's more so it's a spiritual sight. So even using this example a little further, you're looking to the heavens. You have your eyes set on heavenly things, even by looking at a star. And so when the conditions of life, or in this case, the waters, the wind, whatever it is, even things going on in the boat, are your focus, then your point of reference is always going to vary, regardless of how experienced and wise you are in those things. Being able to turn your eyes upward and be open to that spiritual, unchanging way that has been set, that no man has control over. It will always be there in the sight of all those who choose to turn towards it. Then that can be what informs that sense of direction, and the way you move in response to the circumstances, the changing circumstances of life, is applying the knowledge of the mean, and it's how you remain in the way. Anyways.
Yeah, and so, consider that in the relationship that Confucius has here with his students and their query of others. Is he really wanting to draw something out about these individuals in particular, or is he wanting his students to glean something of a greater value? Obviously it's that, and that's why he doesn't embellish certain things. He wants to, in a sense, guide them, because as Noah said, this is not some, something that you can just put into practice because you choose to. There has to be a transformation in the way that you think, and that's not just about it being a process, but it does take a process in order for that transformation to come to be. or come to a certain place of development in your life, so you can see things in that way. And so, in essence, the disciples here then are saying to, or are wanting to glean from their master, how do you see this? So they're not learning from those people as much as they're learning the way that their master thinks about those things. That's the whole different perspective here. You can read this and be like, oh, well, you know, well drawn this or that and this person. But you might miss entirely how a man of wisdom looks at those things. And that's a far more value. That's a much longer term perspective in life to hold. And so, you know, in reference to Noah's illustration, looking around you in a very short-sighted way doesn't really get you anywhere. But when you look beyond, further away, and that can include time and space, then you have a greater bearing in life. And that's the means by which we come to the right way. It's not a bunch of sharp turns. Typically, it's what would you call that? A trending, you know, it's more like a trend than it is a sharp turn. But it requires consistency. Always. Consistency over time creates that curve. In life, it's hard to make sharp turns. And the human psyche doesn't work well with sharp turns either. It actually goes into a defensive mode and shuts itself down with those kinds of things. So you have to know that about yourself and about others too. And that's why the daily disciplines of life, the small things, matter more than the big things. That's been a pretty consistent principle here, and is in life in general. Okay. We will call that our morning. Isaac, do us the honors.
Of course. Lord, we continue to be thankful for this time that you have given us to spend in relationship with one another. Lord, continue to bless it, Lord, not just what which we are consuming or learning, Lord, but we really want to learn how to study, how we think, how to think about things the proper way and in a way that you would have us. And even to learn how to discipline ourselves under you. So we bless that work, Lord, and continue to bless the relationships around us, Lord, people that you have put us in contact with, and that continue to keep and open up in our lives. Lord, that we also view those relationships with the proper perspective and relate to those people how you would have us, Lord, so we continue to seek you for those things. Amen.